Welcome to the retake video for the fourth and final section of this choice board, which is on orders of operations. Once again, the section where you get to play hopscotch. If anyone didn't like the joke from the first video, remember that I have hundreds upon hundreds more, so my poor students, they get to see them like every day. So, just as a quick review of orders of operations, on the left we had PEMDAS written in this form because multiplication and division are the same operation, so we want to make sure that we treat them equally, working left to right like we're reading a book. Addition and subtraction, same thing. These are treated equally because they are equivalent expressions, so that addition does not come before subtraction, and once again we work left to right. If we are doing op-hop, which is here on the right, we want to start with grouping symbols. The big difference between this and PEMDAS is we call this grouping instead of just parentheses. Now, parentheses is one of the types of grouping, but it is not the only. The second term is exponents. That does not change at all in op-hop or PEMDAS. Then the third is multiplication and division, just like we had before. And the fourth and final is addition and subtraction, just like we had before. Remembering once again, multiplication and division you hit at the same time because you do those steps at the same time. Addition and subtraction, same thing, hit at the same time so that one step does not come before the other. So, working through a few more examples here. In this problem, we do have parentheses or grouping symbols right away. So the first thing we want to do is right here. -5 minus 23 more. We're going to go left on the number line. And we end at -28. The rest of this problem is going to stay the same. And so we get 9 minus -28, which is our last step. Since this is two negatives in between, we treat that like a plus sign. So we do 9 plus 28, and we end with an answer of 37. Once again, we did parentheses first, one step at a time, and then addition, subtraction, second. For the next problem, we have absolute value signs here on the right. Remembering that grouping symbols come first, we are actually going to do anything inside the absolute value sign first. So the 18 times -32 and the division symbol are going to stay. Absolute value of 4 squared, that becomes 16. Now, absolute value means the distance away from 0. The distance that 16 is away from 0 is still just 16. So our problem is going to stay roughly equivalent here of 16. Okay. Now, one of the things that can happen in orders of operations, and you might have seen it so far, is if you have only multiplication and division, you can actually work these in any order. Now, I noticed that 18 times -32 is substantially more difficult than -32 divided by 16. So I'm actually going to do that part first, just to change the problem a little bit. -32 divided by +16 is -2. So we get 18 times -2. And in this part, we get a -36. Now, it's very important to be very cautious when you're doing out-of-order operations. I would only do it if you have the same operation repeatedly, like you have only addition or only multiplication, or multiplication, division also work really nicely together. You can work out of order by identifying the easier part of the problem and working that way. But I would always make sure you double check your answers, because when negatives are involved, it is easy to make a small mistake. As we move to our next set, we actually have two different sets of grouping symbols. I'm going to do this set of grouping symbols first. So I do -1 cubed, which is equal to -1, because -1 times -1 times -1 again is -1. The rest of this problem is going to stay the same. Plus a -35 becomes -35, and this stays as divided by 7. Now we're going to work inside this grouping symbol. We have subtraction and division. We are going to do division first. 35 divided by 7 is actually a positive 5. If you included this negative, you would end up getting the same work either way. So that is not a problem at all. Then we are going to do the rest inside the parentheses, or the grouping symbols here. 16 minus 5 is 11. And the absolute value of 11, because 11 is still just 11 away from 0, stays as just positive 11. So now we get negative 1 minus absolute value of 11, which is, or sorry, the negative 1 minus regular 11 gives us an answer of negative 12. That one is a little tricky. A lot of steps in there, and always have to be careful with absolute value. Last problem, and this is about as difficult as these problems can get. So if you have a handle on this one, you're in great shape overall. So inside of the grouping symbols, I see an exponent, so I'm going to do this part of the problem first. Negative 1 cubed is still negative 1. As I work through, I notice I have two negatives here, so I'm going to turn that into a plus. Absolute value of 22 divided by negative 1. Now, still inside the grouping symbols, I notice that 22 divided by negative 1 is negative 22. And important that since this is absolute value, the absolute value of negative 22 is a positive 22. Now, we are going to do the division before the addition. 22 divided by 22 is a positive 1. And then negative 5 plus 1, we're going to go to the right on the number line, and we land at a negative 4. Remember that if you have any questions, make sure you ask me, and make sure your score is shared with me as well.